And welcome to the day the rain arrives. This was a super quiet night, mostly because I was super careful and came back into the state land trust land. It was really hard to get a sense for what was around me in the dark, but this is actually a really nice camp. Super quiet, just me, a couple of cows, and some coyotes. I also didn't have a single thing freeze last night, and it felt like I almost had too many layers on, which is a nice change from, a week ago. It looks like I've got a couple of more days of temperatures in the 50s, 60s, and getting down to the 30s at night, and then after the rainstorm arrives this weekend, then it's going to drop back down and be 40s to 20s. So today is Pie Town. I've got another 11 miles or so. It may rain on me a bit. It looks like it's going to be a fairly minor storm per the forecast, but who knows? Could be a monsoon, flooding, etc., etc. I was careful not to set up in a ditch or anything last night. Pie Town itself, it looks like there is like a coffee shop or something. It is pretty small. The big thing there as far as hiker facilities is something called the Toaster House, which is somebody had an extra house and they left it open for bike packers and hikers, and it's been that way for a good long while. So I had my resupply sent to there, which is good unless somebody walked off with it, along with an extra pair of underwear. And then I was checking the comments because, okay, maybe I'll spend the night there because the next road walk, I don't know if there's going to be camping, going out to where I actually get back on trail in another like 15 miles. There's a comment saying that the water was shut off in the house, so showers, bathroom, sink, etc. don't work, and so I'm not quite sure what I'm going to find when I get there. But plan is kind of like TLC Ranch yesterday, just hit it, get my resupply repackaged to get me to reserve, and then get back on the trail. My feet took a beating yesterday with all the hard pack and the miles, so I'm going to switch to new socks just to try and set myself up as well as I can. I don't have that many clean pairs of socks left, even with my throwaways, though. I love listening to the coyotes. They were going off last night, but they didn't get too close. And this is why I don't do cheap socks. Well, basically came from yesterday with all the dust. I have the old version of the Hornet, not the Osmo variant they just issued. But when my tent poles had an issue, they replaced them with a set of Osmo poles. I really don't like these. You see how short they are? I'm pretty sure they did it for bike packing, but it means you have more segments to fold up, and that's kind of the most time-consuming part of putting up this tent. And they don't fit in the bag real well. And the longer ones were less big around, and so I could fit them in the side pocket. I may see if I can find an old pair or fix the pair that had the break. And one of my major gear pet peeves is tight stuff sacks. I didn't used to keep the poles in a stuff sack since I had them outside, but these are harder to keep contained. I get rid of the one that comes with the tent. I just use a, loose DCF stuff sack. One of the challenges I have to staying on schedule out here is if I don't do my edits the very next day, I have a bad habit of falling behind. But at the same time, days like yesterday were not overly fun. Yesterday was just one big long slog, down a straight line that rarely had any reasonable views. So it can be hard to wake up to my alarm at dark 30 and then dive into that. Some days I really look forward to it. I mean, I can't do them at the end of the day because end of the day I'm usually just tired and done with all that. I want to just watch a TV show or something and not think about the last 10 to 12 hours. But if there's been interesting weather, interesting sights, interesting animal encounters, I'm often really excited to do the edit. And there's just something satisfying about producing something. Which, when it's a day where I'm probably not going to look back on it super fondly, a little less so. So I do carry Gaia on my phone, and I had enough internet I was able to pull the public-private property layer. And per that, this is a grid of state trust land. So I thought, hey, cool, I can camp here legally, as it turns out. I just have to pay for this $35 permit. And then after a whole bunch of hassle trying to get the permit, it turns out that CDT hikers no longer are required to have that. You can see I came pretty far back from the road. because I've had people investigate my tent before, so I don't like being visible from the road. I did do a little research, and it looks like there are BLM and State Land Trust grids along the 60, which is the road leaving Pytown. So I should be good for going in, getting my resupply, and then moving on. It looks like places like the Toaster House, and there's a shelter somebody was asking about on the Blue Line alt leaving Pytown, are basically winterizing. So they're just shutting water off for the winter. So no, nothing like, showers or toilets or things like that. And quite frankly, most of the time I would much rather camp out in a place like this. It's quieter and it's more what I'm out here to do. That TLC ranch yesterday was cool. I mean, I really appreciated the water and the fruit, and I just love that people open up their properties for thru hikers like that. But it would have been a much louder night, right by the road, lots of animals, stuff like that. Versus here, this was pretty much an ideal spot to set up camp. And back to my friend, the endless dusty road. Though, if the forecasted morning rainstorm hits, I think this is going to turn from dusty to damn muddy. That'll be fun. I'll be mud skating into town. It is 12 miles to the Toaster House, so I should get in there early afternoon. I'm hoping they have power. I do need to charge my battery a little bit. I can stretch it to get to the next thing, but I like to have extra just in case anything happens, battery fails, weather comes in, feet melt down, and I need an extra day or two. So at best, I'm off this road walk segment sometime tomorrow. It is about 24 miles from here to where the red line turns off of the 60. On the plus side, besides this storm, there's a bigger one arriving on the weekend, which should correspond about with my stop at Reserve. We look like we have a plan there. We're going to pay a little extra. The hitching situation can be time consuming. There is a place that'll rent you a room for a reasonable rate and then do a trailhead out and back shuttle for a slightly high rate, but it's a ways. So probably just going to bite the bullet and do that. And once I'm clear of Reserve, then I get into the last of these sections that I've really wanted to do, really looking forward to, which is Black Hills, aka the section most people don't see because they end up in the Gila. And the Gila is nice and all. I was out there in spring on the Grand Enchantment Trail, but I'm excited for the trail less traveled. And the brief section of overlap with the Get that I did in spring, I enjoyed. As of this morning, I have 420 some miles left until Mexico, assuming I can finish the red line. I was talking to Jen last night, and honestly, that's still way too many miles to even have any real mental concept of this coming to an end. That's 3+ weeks at least. It'll start feeling a little realer as I get down to 200 miles or so. And even then, quite frankly, this trail's kicked me in the face enough times where I'm not assuming anything till I see that monument off in the distance. AKA when I'm close enough where a broken leg, I could still crawl to the end. It'd probably be through cactus, but as far as camping along sections like this, I've seen a lot of people who will set up, right there, right on the side of the road visible. And, on the big 3 trails, that's probably relatively safe. I say probably because you do see some incidents on the AT that tend to happen near roads. I like to avoid it just because people in rural areas will often come out to drink on these roads. I find discarded alcohol bottles all the time. And some people are angry drunks. The times I've had people come up and bother me in the middle of the night were when I was near a road. So better all around to just be away. And there's no real advantage to being by the road. I think people do it because they perceive it as being safer than the wilderness sometimes. But, you know, if you're convinced that the bears are going to come eat you, they'll eat you by the road or deeper in the forest. As far as two-legged human problems, those are much more likely to occur the more front country you are. The Alabama Roadwalk section of the Eastern Continental Trail, which is, 200 miles through stuff like this, I didn't have any issues. I was careful where I camped, after learning my lessons in Florida. However, there were stories, somebody had a 2x4 thrown through his tent late at night, and somebody else got confronted by somebody with a gun. Now, that person was probably camping on private property, which is another thing I go out of my way not to do, but yeah. So when it's something like this, I'll load up the guy layer. I will try and make sure that the property is, state land, etc., etc. I don't go past any no trespassing signs. I generally don't go over, fences. I say generally because there are times like out here where it's open range and the fences are just to keep the cows off of the road. But in general, I want to be someplace where I'm not going to bother anybody. Best way I found for that is when I have internet, I open up Google Maps. This is the same thing we used on the Swanee and on the Mississippi. And the satellite view on Google Maps is higher quality than any of the Gaia, Caltopo, etc. available layers I've found. So I'll scroll around on Google Maps, see where the nearest houses are, look for road structures, things like that, and try and avoid them as best I can. Sometimes the best you can is just behind a bush or something. There were some times up in Canada where I was quite close to the road or across from a house, but I was tucked away so they couldn't see my lights. I think the worst in recent memory was on the Condor Trail, where I was having foot issues. Couldn't make it to the state park, so I ended up in the bushes off PCH. And as it turned out, I was like 20 feet from a no camping sign, $200 fine, which honestly would have been cheaper than taking a taxi into town and getting a hotel. So, but yeah, there I was in the bushes. I was well hidden, but I had to be really, really careful with my lights. Like, I was using the front screen of my phone as the primary light because I didn't want to be seen by anybody driving down the road. Am I more paranoid and cautious than I need to be? Pretty sure, yeah. But I also end up doing this more than a lot of people. And as I've said before, I really enjoy being in the tent at the end of the day. That is very restful and relaxing, things like last night. And it causes me a lot of stress when I'm huddled behind a sign at 11:30 at night as it's raining and the mosquitoes are running rampant outside. And then lights hit my tent from somebody who's coming to roust me. The learning curve down in Florida. I am constantly amazed I made it through that whole thing. And by that, I don't mean the Florida Trail. I love the Florida Trail. I would happily go back and do that. That was my favorite section of the entire Eastern Continental Trail I did. It was the section south of the Florida Trail, coming through the Keys and then that gap until you get to Big Cypress. There's been a surprising amount of traffic out here. That was one of the few people that actually stopped and said hi. Apparently, though, if you're a solo female, there's a guy in a red truck who will creepily try and get you to camp on his ranch. Doesn't do that with male or mixed hikers. So interestingly enough, on the State Land Trust, there is a $35 a year permit that allows you to use the land, basically. But as of February this year, they no longer require CDTers to get that. But there is no CDT permit. Like on the PCT, the permit you get covers all the areas in between. It's also, I think, counts as a stove / campfire permit, last I checked. But here, the written agreement went away because, again, you don't have to have the permit. In reality, they're mostly, when they have the no camping signs up, they're mostly to avoid people, driving out with the family with a bunch of cars, setting up, trashing the area like you see along the Kern and other places. Not through hikers where, I camped until dark, slipped off the road where nobody saw me. And other than some footprints and the imprint of my pad through the bottom of the tent, you'd be hard pressed to tell where I camped. As always, jerks and assholes ruin it for everybody. This is why when I'm talking like theory of government and things like that with people, I always cite shopping cart theory, aka government intervention wouldn't be required if people would just clean up after themselves in a situation where there is no consequence to not doing it. Instead, look at your average Ralph's. If you didn't have an employee cleaning up all the shopping carts, it would be a mess of carts in every freaking parking space. Yeah, I kind of figured. I called the number for Doe's and Buck's Coffee, and they're closed. It is the TLC Ranch people. And they were nice. I was at least able to thank them for the water stop yesterday. They were surprised that anybody was out here this late. I have been getting that from people in town and in cars. They are encouraging, but keep saying, oh yeah, you better get to Mexico before winter arrives. And there's those rainstorms forecast was talking about. So it looks like the Pioneer restaurant may be open starting at noon, but looks like it's $30 pie and coffee, and that's about it. No actual hearty good food. In other news, I found out after Pie Town there's a top of the world stop, and after that 34-mile dry carry. On the plus side, at least I'll have less food since I'm going into reserve. I was originally going to be doing a 150-mile carry. This is partially why I'm going into reserve, because 150 miles worth of food will strain my pack as is at the pace I'm going. And then if you add, 7 some liters of water, fun times. So that means my plan is probably going to need to be get near that top of the world store, make sure I can get water in the morning, camp there, fill up, chug 2.5, fill 7, and then go for it. Other issues aside, sections like this can be the hardest for me to get through, just because I'm counting down the miles to get someplace and there's not really much to look at. Well, welcome to Pie Town. I decided I'm going to head for Toaster House, see about the food situation first. Toaster House, I presume. Well, I found my most recent package. Unfortunately, no sign of the Amazon box yet.
The post office isn't still open though?
Well, it wasn't sent to the post office. It was UPS here, because that was the advice. Found it. The Toaster House is one of those places where somebody opened their house to hikers and bike packers, and then later when she moved, she kept the house and left it open. It is one of the iconic stops along the CDT because there ain't a whole heck of a lot in Pie Town. Surprisingly, the register showed that I wasn't quite as alone as I expected. There were a few people just a few days ahead, though, as expected, the majority of people came through here in mid to late October. So since the water's shut off over here, the deal is to get water for drinking or anything else, you gotta go to the RV place next door. The house does have an outhouse out back, and entertainingly enough, it's a 2-holer, not unlike that one that gets photoed all the time on the AT. I really, really did not want to overnight here. I wanted to be dispersed camping again tonight, but considering there are 37 miles of dry carry ahead, I kind of figure I'm better off if I limit it to just one night to get through that. So in the morning, I will drink as much as I can, get walking down the road, and carry 7 liters, I guess. Most of the afternoon was spent repackaging my resupply since I needed to get rid of a couple of days worth of food, and I decided that rather than be wasteful, I'd just eat out of that rather than pay $30 for some pie. Going next door to get water one last time, then probably turning in. I am really wishing I was out on the road. Not that's not nice being out of the wind and, you know, being a little warmer and everything. I like my isolated, dispersed camps. Home sweet home-ish.